Today we are celebrating the feast day of the dedication of Peter and Paul's basilicas. The two great Roman basilicas named after Peter and Paul were built over their tombs, symbolizing those two pillars. We celebrate their feast, their solemnity, really, on June 29th. And Paul and Peter are two pillars of the faith, where the church is set on apostolic foundations. And so it's very important to understand that in the church, that these two figures, stalwart figures, were foundational in laying the foundation for the faith in Rome during their end of their lives when they were martyred. Following the Edict of Milan in around 312, 313, there was a resurgence, 250 years of Christian persecution, and then Christians were given freedom to worship by Emperor Constantine the Great. And so he initiated not just that edict and led everyone to the official, faith went from paganism to Christianity. It was kind of a big deal. It also led to him building these two basilicas. And so St. Peter's Basilica is on Vatican Hill. It's enshrined over the tomb of Peter. And he was crucified upside down around 64, 65 AD. So about 30 to 35 years plus after Christ died. Nero was the one that, Nero was vicious, killing Christians every day, every night, burning them on to the stake every night. I mean, the streets were littered with dead, and they would burn their bodies for light. So really morbid period of time in the early church. So Emperor Constantine granting the official religion of Rome as Christian was monumental. It shifted everything. So there was excavations at those sites where they venerated both, and Constantine took the opportunity to build on top of those. So it was like, 250 years later, along with his mother Helen, who was famously attributed to finding the true cross. He got the best architects that he could find, and they built the initial basilicas. So these were the first ones. They later were rebuilt because centuries went by, I think 1,000 years. They eventually had to rebuild them. But they were dedicated by Pope Sylvester on November 18th, around 326 AD. It was a huge, that first basilica I read was, it had 5 aisles. It was quite enormous, and it was more reminiscent of Roman architecture than what St. Peter's Basilica is today, which is in a different time period, different architecture. But St. Paul's Basilica was on the outside of the walls, and it was out on a different part of in the area by what they call the Ostian Way, which is where Paul was buried. He was beheaded in this area, and famously his head, when it dropped, fountains erupted, and it dropped 3 times, I guess. And so I can't remember what the fountain is called. It's called something in threes, the 3 fountain. It escapes me. I wasn't prepared. But his basilica was near there. Those fountains are near there, and it's where he was buried still to this day. So Constantine also erected a basilica over Paul. And so the great devotion to these two saints, Peter and Paul, and those two basilicas lasted a long time. They lasted about 1,200 plus years. They stood for over a millennia. But, 1,200 years of a building built in the 300s, they had to rebuild it because it was just poor condition. Just the shifting of the earth alone will make things not squared up, the walls and everything shifts over time. And so it was 15th, 16th centuries that they rebuilt them. I think 1506, Pope Julius II demolished them, and he commissioned a grand body of architects, including with Bramante, who was a famous architect, and Raphael, famous artist, and Michelangelo. So that's why we have Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, how he painted that. So Pope Julian put him to work quite a bit, not just in constructing St. Peter's Dome, in what we have now at St. Peter's Basilica, the second basilica. Michelangelo crafted that dome, and it took 120 years to build it. So it wasn't like christened, consecrated until like 1630 something, 1626, 1630s. But 1,300 years from its first construction, 326, 1,300 years later, 1626, it was consecrated again by Pope Urban VIII. And it was the St. Peter's Basilica we have now today. St. Paul's, unfortunately, only lasted, I think 400 or 500 years, because there was a great fire, kind of like what happened with Notre Dame Cathedral. St. Paul's Basilica suffered it almost got burned to the ground. It was almost total near destruction. So they rebuilt it again, and so Pope Pius IX in 1954-ish, somewhere in the 1850s, had a joint feast. So later on, there was a third christening of that feast. So November 18th, they were initially built in the 300s by Constantine. 1,300 years later, they were rebuilt. And then Paul's was rebuilt again because of the fire in 1823 and so forth. But it was all on this date. So that's why it's a special day of dedication to those basilicas. They're in the Roman calendar for a reason, and it helps preserve those buildings, but also the tradition. Sacred tradition is important in our faith, with a lowercase t. The celebration underscores the two great saints, Peter and Paul, who are pillars of the church, and whose martyrdoms and relics are underneath these two great basilicas. So God bless, and remember, if you ever go to Rome, there's two amazing basilicas there with a lot of history. God bless, and I'll see you at Mass.